Welcome into WeAreSC. Welcome into Four Downs. This is Erik McKinney, joined by Greg Katz. Greg, we don't have a USC game to preview as we look forward a little bit, but we'll go back and kind of maybe use these four downs to bridge the gap a little bit between USC's 2023 season, specifically that 42-28 win in the Holiday Bowl over Louisville, and then look ahead a little bit to 2024. There's still so much. It doesn't make a ton of sense to break down 2024 yet. We might not know half the roster at this point based on who could come in and out and how quickly that stuff can change. But what I want to do for first down is, as always, we kind of hit the USC offense as we look forward to the game. But this one we'll look back a little bit. I'm curious your takeaway in terms of what gives you kind of hope. What do you take from that Louisville game offensively for USC? Again, in a season where in all three phases, there were just kind of some major disappointments, even though offensively points were scored, yards were put up, all of that. But what's your kind of glimmer of hope from that Louisville game as we kind of look forward and tentatively look at what 2024 could be on that side of the ball for USC?
Well, I think the distinction that I drew from it was just how disciplined they were on offense. Now, I know that they didn't have about 72 yards in rushing. Okay, that's a problem, especially if you want to go in for a national championship. But however, in the big picture, I saw what probably is more like the offense that Lincoln Riley wants to run if he can improve his running game. I think what happened with Caleb Williams, in my opinion, is Caleb Williams, if we use a basketball analogy, was like a shooting point guard. And if you're running a motion offense, it's like everybody's screening and passing away, but they don't know whether the point guard's going to shoot it or what he's going to do. And what happens is when you don't know, he who hesitates is lost, right? So I think in the case of Caleb, I think he became a more undisciplined player because he was trying to make the big play. Now, don't get me wrong. If they have a good season, he's the Heisman Trophy winner. But it didn't work out that way. But what I see here is I see that Miller Moss took what he had, did exactly what he was programmed to do. There was no sacks of Miller Moss, right? And the things we have to remember in the transition from the Holiday Bowl into the fall is you had Elijah Page at left tackle, right? We didn't see him all year. And suddenly there's Elijah starting at left tackle. We didn't see Jonah Monheim, an NFL prospect, so we're told. He wasn't at a tackle's position. He was starting at right guard. So there's two major changes right there. Mason Murphy got to play a little bit in place of Elijah Page. And what I thought was they looked like they knew what they were really doing. And remember, both rosters were depleted. SC is vastly more than Louisville's, but the fact of the matter is you got to see what Jacoby Lane was all about. You got to see what Makai Lemon was all about, what Deuce Robinson's all about. You could argue maybe they should have been playing over some of the guys that were already playing, right? But they didn't. But the good news to me was they got to show what they are capable of doing. Okay. So I felt it was good on offense to see hope. That's the biggest thing. It looked a little hopeless going into the Holiday Bowl. Louisville had the defensive stats and Miller Moss, I'm going to tell you, the guy is a freaking leader. He every question they asked him after the game, nothing was about him. They could have said, "What's your name?" And he would have said, "It's about my teammates. My teammates were what made it all happen." And even they asked him on the podium when he got the award for MVP. They said, "Oh, you threw 6 touchdown passes, yada, yada, yada." And he says, "Yeah, but I threw an interception." That is what it's all about. It's not about Miller Moss. And that's the type of attitude that's going to carry over to LSU when they open up against LSU. My only fear on it, honestly, and this is just my opinion, so throw bananas or whatever you want at me. I don't know what goes on in Lincoln Riley's mind in terms of quarterbacks. Another basketball analogy, Some coaches can never find the right point guard, can never find it. You're not shooting enough. No, you're shooting too much. You're passing. No, you're not. You should have passed it. It's like Miller Moss is right in front of your face. He's your starting quarterback until somebody knocks him off. Don't tell me somebody's going to beat him out in practice, because this goes deeper. This goes so deep that the team loves him. The guys that are returning respect him. You can't bring in a 1-year mercenary. And why? What? No, there's no guy, Will Howard. He's going to come and sit down for 1 season. He'll go to Ohio State and take that NIL money before he comes to SC, and that's not a bad thing. I don't blame Lincoln Riley if he wants to get more than 1 quarterback, 2 quarterbacks, but his starting quarterback is right in front of his face, and he's going to help save him, just like Sam Darnold did for Clay Helton. Now, I'm not saying that Clay Helton and Lincoln Riley are the same coach, of course not, but that's what Miller Moss could be. He could be the Sam Darnold next year, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, for me, you hit a lot of the points. The Elijah Page thing stands out because he played really well against a Louisville defensive front. Again, Louisville offensively, they didn't have their number 1 receiver. They didn't have their number 1 running back. The drop from 1 to 2 statistically this year for them on that side was significant. Defensively, they were missing a few depth pieces, but the guys that put up the stats all year, they were on the field. And so Elijah Page got a real look at a defense that was good this year, and he stood up to it. And anytime you can have a true freshman play like that, again, it's 1 game. We didn't see a ton of him all season, but you factor in the way he looked when he shows up, the way he looks now, the confidence he played with. You saw a few plays where he's checking with tight ends and backs and quarterbacks and doing all the communication that you need as a left tackle. If you're doing that at the end of your true freshman season, you spin that into an off season, you get a spring ball, you move forward, you get a summer. If you can lock that spot up with a true sophomore, that's a good spot to be if you're looking forward in that USC offense, especially because left tackle, since Lincoln Riley has gotten here, it's been like every time, what do we do there? What do we do there? You bring in a portal guy, you try to figure out, is Cortland Ford the answer? Bobby Haskins last year, you bring in Michael Tarquin. Okay, that's not going to work. Let's flip John Juan in there. Elijah Page was brought in to play left tackle. If he can do it, which it looked like in that game he can, that is a big time check mark for your offense that you can do. You talked a lot about Miller Moss. We talked about him after the game. That performance, again, if whoever wins the national championship, if that's a quarterback who's coming back next season, that guy's got the most positive momentum going forward. Miller Moss is going to be in that group, I think, of quarterbacks that play that well in their last game, where you talk about them as being, potential face of college football next year. I mean, the USC quarterback always is that, but few guys are going to play better than what Miller Moss put on the field in that game. The one position that I want to hit outside of that, and in terms of importance, it's the offensive line, right? But in terms of flash and what you saw in that game, those 4 true freshman wide receivers that USC brought in that 2023 class, Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson separated themselves a little bit just in terms of how much they did early on. Zachariah Branch separated himself from just about any true freshman this year in terms of wide receivers. But if USC can hang on to those 4 and keep them, and I say if they can hang on, because in college football now, you just never know. You never know when a guy's going to go or who's going to go or any of that. But those 4 guys, you can line them up and put them on the field at the same time. And oh my goodness, the mismatches and what Lincoln Riley can do with that group, that was impressive from them in that game. And I think that is something where you can really look at USC being a dynamic offense with that group of skill players. And again, USC's always got the skill players. And what we're going to end up talking about as we go into the season, and I'm looking forward 9 months here, the offensive line. And that's got a lot of questions to answer. And we'll get into that down the road. But in terms of that Louisville game, if you've got a piece at left tackle and you've got skill guys all around it, then you fill in the pieces and you feel pretty good. Again, offense is never going to be the question when Lincoln Riley is your head coach. But the question, and we'll get into second down here, looking at the defensive side for USC. Now, this is we're going to go, right? We're going positive. We're going, what did you see? What did you see in that Louisville game? Again, held Louisville to 28 points. It had been months since USC had held a team to 28 points. You've got to go back to that Arizona State game, which feels like preseason at this point in terms of going back. But what did you see defensively that maybe USC can hang on to or build from? And again, it's going to be new coach, right? New defensive coordinator coming in and Danton Lynn, already 2 new defensive coaches hired. Lincoln Riley said, they're still evaluating. Maybe there's more changes there. We'll see how things go forward. But was there something on the field with those guys that USC maybe can build on and go forward with?
Well, I was actually, my focus was on a pass rush and the secondary. Now, we have to say it as it is, that Plummer dislocated his pinky finger in the game, so he probably didn't have the zip that he would have normally had. But that being said, there's other things you had to look at. One, I was really kind of struck by their tackling in the secondary. The corners especially were tackling, for the most part, below the waist, hitting knees, ankles, and guys were going down. The problems that they had were when guys wanted to tackle high and they wrap them. I go, wrap them. They can't even put their arms around them and clasp their hands. They're too wide. But you could see, and I think we have to give a lot of credit to Taylor Mays. Taylor Mays has said from the word go that you have to tackle low, right? That's a Pete Carroll thing. You need to tackle low, take away the engine, so to speak. They can't go anywhere if their legs aren't going anywhere. I'm wondering, as a kind of a sidebar here, does Taylor Mays, does he become part of the coaching staff on the field as a secondary coach? In my opinion, if that's the result and he can make that impression within 6 weeks of practice since they played, the last game, November 18th against UCLA, to where they are today, I feel really good about it, okay? Because before anything, you got to be fundamentally sound. Even if you don't have great players, you can still be fundamentally sound. I liked I liked what they did, a more traditional defensive line. They got 3 sacks. That's a big deal. That creates hesitation in a quarterback. Are they going to get to me or are they not going to get to me? So I like that. And we know, and Bear Alexander had a big tackle there. If he can do that almost every play, that can make a huge difference. But I think overall, I think that there was stuff that was done there, given the time between the last game and this one. They came to play hard. They didn't want to be dominated. Yes, they got dominated on running the ball. You can't dismiss 200 and plus some yards. I mean, that's just the way it is. And a lot of it was Louisville was way more physical on the offensive line than SC was on the defensive line. And where we were seated in the press box, we kind of had like the old Madden look in games, like a Nintendo game. You were looking behind the line of scrimmage, and you could see guys getting knocked off the line of scrimmage. And Louisville did a really nice job of kind of hesitating. The ball carrier would kind of hesitate, let it develop. Where's the hole? Then hit the hole. And they had some good quick backs. But all in all, I thought it gave me a lot of hope that if they do get players that are bigger, stronger, faster, and of course, Lynn's going to bring in a whole new system, and the players know it. And the players, definitely want to say, hey, I can play, you just show me what your system is. I can tackle in any system. That there was a lot of positive to take away from it. We'll see where it goes from here. And as you said, there may be some changes on defense still. I don't know how many more changes you can have, except for maybe 2 more. But it's definitely something to watch in the off season, in my opinion.
What stood out to me was the effort, right? The effort, the intensity. They showed up to play. This is a game where I don't want to say you don't blame the guys if they don't show up, but that's where college football is right now. These lower tier, and the Holiday Bowl is a fun bowl game to go to, but anything that's not the playoff now, right? Or maybe the New Year's Six bowls gets tagged as the lower tier bowl games. And that's where you see just a rash of guys opting out and not playing, and I'm hurt a little bit, so I'm not going to go. And it wouldn't have been shocking after that year if that had happened. That defense showed up, and I think where it showed up the most was in that secondary. And what stood out to me is you were playing without Damani Jackson, without Christian Roland-Wallace, and without Caleb Bullock, three guys that took a huge majority. Now, Christian Roland-Wallace was very good for USC, so I don't want to make it seem like him not playing was a benefit there. But you had guys that hadn't played a ton of snaps, and Prophet Brown is one at corner, and Anthony Beavers is one at safety. And Jalen Smith playing back there too, had played a ton, but not at that position, shifting out of nickel and going back a little bit. But those guys brought it. That secondary was the reason that I think the reason that USC won on defense, at least, because you mentioned the front seven still has, it's got issues with the way it played in that game, right? It did not do enough to shut down that Louisville running game. But the secondary, and there were errors in the secondary. There were some issues with containment and all of that. It wasn't perfect, but I think you can build on some of that from the secondary, and those guys are going to show up. The hope, I think, defensively that you're seeing maybe from that game, and with a wholesale change in coordinator and scheme and all of that, is you get a group of guys that now believes in spring ball. Hey, I can play. I can do this. If I play that well, I'm going to get on the field. And I think that's what we saw a little bit in that game. Guys who hadn't been utilized all that much, playing with that fire and that passion that you have to play with defensively. There were some runs that got broken, but there wasn't the 60-yard run where three guys are in the wrong spot and someone's running the wrong way. I mean, that stood out a lot. The lack of just explosive play after play after play. Louisville really did kind of have to earn everything. Even on the interception that they returned almost all the way, they still had to kind of grind that drive to score a touchdown. I think that stood out. I think you can show them now, hey, you guys can play defense, right? I mean, the way that season ended, where the last 8 games, I think, of the regular season, they are dead last. USC dead last in the country in points allowed over that. That cannot be a good feeling, to know that that's what you're doing defensively, to end it on that positive note and say that this can be done. You guys can play pretty well enough, at least to win. I think that's big going into the offseason. I think they absolutely needed that. Another Tulane bowl game loss, 45-43. That kind of decimates the attitude, I think, of this group going into the offseason. So I think that was big. I think that was an important thing for a defense that needs a ton of fixing. Still, you're still that team that gave up all those yards, all those points, and you still have to kind of build from the ground up here. But you saw enough to know those are still, I think, Trojans playing hard the way you want to see them at the end of the season.
Yeah, there was a sense of urgency. I thought they felt like, you know what, I got to play well. We got to play hard. And I think because they got off to a good start, I think they caught fire and they got excited, maybe more excited than they were when they actually took the field. So it was quite an effort. And I'm going to give Lincoln Riley and his coaching staff credit for getting them up or putting them in the position to get off to a good start. And, more power to them. Good job.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's go to third down. For us here, brought to you by PrizePicks, as always, and we've got a little a slant at some of the semifinal games in the college football playoff here. But PrizePicks is the simplest form of real money daily fantasy sports. Just pits you against the numbers. Whether you're a fantasy sports nut or a casual fan looking to add some excitement to the games, PrizePicks is the perfect game for you. So go to PrizePicks, use code SC for a first deposit match up to $100. You pick 2 to 6 players, you can win 25 times your money on any entry. And we're going to hit some college football stuff, but right now PrizePicks has kind of some fun NFL stuff with red demons and green goblins that will, so the red demons are statistically harder, qualify you for a higher payout. You can win up to 100 times your money. The green goblins, again, statistically easier, but and result in a lower payout, but you have to pick more on the goblins there. So Greg, I'm going to go with what I picked this week. And I just look, we've got Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl in that playoff there. And I went with the Pac-12 team. So I went with Sugar Bowl stuff. And from the looks of it, it looks like I'm kind of looking at a big Texas win. I don't know if that's true, but so I went Rome Odunze less than 103.5 receiving yards. Washington running back Dylan Johnson less than 73.5 rushing yards. Texas wide receiver Xavier Worthy more than 0.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns. That's basically one touchdown for Xavier Worthy. He talked about it. He's dealing with a ankle injury. He's only got 5 touchdowns this season. I think him talking about the ankle injury, maybe that first play he takes off and he's not quite as injured as he's letting on there. But I just, the Odunze 103.5, Washington can spread it around a little bit. I know he's really good, but they put up a ton of points against USC and he didn't get close to that number in that one as they spread it around a little bit. Dylan Johnson against USC, I think SC fans might remember him running for about 400 yards in that game, something around there. I think Texas is a little bit better defensively against the run there. So that's what I went with. I don't know what jumps out to you either about that game or even the Rose Bowl game, Michigan, Alabama. I guess of those two games, what's your what's the one thing that you're most anticipating in either of those?
Well, I think they're fabulous matchups. I mean,
it's fun. It's
a heavyweight championship fight. I think the more appealing game is probably the Rose Bowl. I mean, Alabama, come on, I mean, Alabama, we've seen what their fans are like. They're going to come like it's a big time SEC championship game. Michigan, it just reeks with college football tradition. Both teams are great. I think that it's going to get down to who cracks. In other words, I don't know. I don't have as much confidence in Jalen Milroe in a game of this nature. He just strikes me as he's not quite there yet, but he might run more than he normally runs. But Michigan's got a fantastic defense. They really hit. They've got a guy on the defensive line, Mason Graham from our area, local from Anaheim Servite, right? He's an animal. When people at SC wonder where's all the defensive linemen? Well, there's one that should
get him.
When I was, during a lot of the greatness of SC under Carroll and previous administrations, Servite guys always went to USC. Always went to USC. It was like, okay, here it is. He's going to SC. And when they don't get a guy like that, there's something rotten in Denmark, as they say. I think in the other game, I think a key is going to be at running back for Washington. If he can get off, Dylan Johnson, if he can get off and cause hesitation for Texas, because I think Texas will come to play. I think Texas is very talented. But, I'm not sure that Sarkisian has what it takes. I'm sorry. I don't believe in a leopard changes its spots. When it gets tough, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, we're going to find that out I think what makes this kind of interesting is the word out here, of course, is that Harbaugh might be taking the San Diego Chargers job. I don't know if that's a distraction for Michigan, but I think that Michigan's on a mission because the last year they didn't quite do it, and I think they can do it. I think in a perfect world, let's have Michigan play Washington. It'll be the Pac-10 versus the Big Ten. And what makes it really ironic is they're all going to be in the same conference next year in 2024. So if you're the commissioner of the Big Ten, you know who you're rooting for, right? You're going to say, we're going to take everybody.
I mean, a Michigan Washington national championship game makes a USC difficult 2024 schedule look that much harder if you have to play both, you have to play both teams in the national championship. I'm not sure how many I'm not sure how many teams have had to do that before in the following year. So yeah, fun ones to look forward to coming up here. Let's go to fourth down now, and we'll go back to a USC specific. As always on fourth down, we'll go with our stat, our number that kind of stands out. And for this one, we're going to look back at the season, the USC's 2023 season. What's your number? What stat, what number jumps out to you?
Well, if you combine it without a dash, it would be 85. But since I'm putting a dash there, it's 8-5. That's their record. And it could have been worse. And they had Caleb Williams at quarterback. They got problems in review. We talked about positive moving forward. But when you look backwards and you go, how in the world did we end up that way? 5-4 in the Pac-12. How did we end up that way? Well, when they were 6-0, they basically didn't play anybody except for probably Arizona, because Arizona turned out to be one of the best or better teams in the country. Ask Oklahoma, right? But it stemmed back from a decision that Lincoln Riley made when he decided he was going to support Alex Grinch, because defense was the issue, right? It was the issue. And that contributed to it. And that was his decision. He's got to live with it. But when I look at 8-5 and 5-4, and they had one of the worst defenses ever, you'd go, buddy, you had 2 years to do something about it. I get the first year, honeymoon, not enough talent, but you relied on the transfer portal and tried to do a mercenary job so that some of these guys that should have been sophomores getting ready to play this year, it wasn't happening. And I'm not going to go further into it. I'm just going to say 8-5 and 5-4 is unacceptable at many programs, but a storied USC getting paid $110 million for 10 years, dude, you better figure out a way to reverse it. Otherwise, you're going to be feeling greater heat than you have ever felt in your coaching career.
Yeah. So my number is 46 from this year, and that's going to be the combined loss number to Notre Dame and UCLA. So
Right.
28 to Notre Dame, 18 to UCLA. USC scored 20 points in each of those two games. And that can't happen to those two teams. And I know you'll talk about, when we went into it, right, the no walkthrough at Notre Dame, talking to players ahead of both of them. There's some Miller Moss gets, Jonah Monheim gets it, the Southern California kids, and we can get into what states you need to recruit and can you bring a team together nationally and all of that stuff. That's a different discussion than guys knowing the week of Notre Dame, the week of UCLA, what that means and everything that goes into those games. And it just felt like for so many of them, it's another game. And again, that's kind of an interesting thing. Do you treat everything one game at a time, or do you really blow these things up? How do you handle that? And we have the benefit of just saying you didn't handle it well. Again, 46, right? Like so whatever you did there, that did not work in those two games, because it was a no-show in the beginning for both of them. That's what was kind of so disappointing about them. If you lose both games and it's a hard-fought game all the way to the end, and it's an 8-5 season and you took both those teams to the wire. It's not great, but it's okay compared to this kind of season where you just no-showed in both those games to start them. And so I know you got bigger issues to deal with, and so much, and we talk about this all the time, so much of college football is just the playoff. Did you get to the playoff? Did you win the playoff? Are you the national championship? All these little rivalries we've seen with conferences blowing up and teams not playing. Is USC going to play Stanford ever? Cal ever? I mean, going forward, those rivalries don't mean as much as they used to, but Notre Dame's going to be on that schedule. UCLA is going to be on that schedule. You're going to play those teams every year, and it's got to be different in 2024, because this year, in all the list of things that were just kind of brutal for USC fans to deal with and watch, and the players too. I mean, I don't want to pretend like they just skated through it and were fine with how it happened. But that specifically is what stands out to me, at least, about this year, was that those two games in particular, when you could show up and play the way you did against Louisville, right, with that kind of effort from the get-go, it didn't happen in those two games. And so that's going to be something to watch, I think, as we move forward here. So that's it for us right now, ahead of the playoff semifinal games. We'll make sure to take a look at those, and looking forward to more moves, right, from USC. Transfer portal moves, guys in, guys out. What does the coaching staff kind of look like? But this is our 4 Downs look back at the 2023 season. For Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching 4 Downs. Thanks for watching WeAreSC.